Welcome to the Growler, a Who Dey podcast hosted by Paul Dehner and other bald friends like Mo Egger, Dave Lapham, home of all your Bengals breaks, takes. Welcome to the Growler.
All right, welcome into the latest edition of the Growler. Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic here on Balds Don't Lie with my other bald friend, Mo Egger, ESPN 1530. What's up, buddy?
I feel like we've kind of broken the synergy, though. I have a hat on today.
I have hats here if we need to go to them. If we feel like if everything just feels off,
okay,
and we get a few minutes in and it's uncomfortable, I can always just throw the hat on. But for now, let's try.
Let's see how we do.
About testing new things.
Yep.
Everybody, make sure you are following along. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. We've got a nice new setup on there. You can watch some individual segments in our Growler Bits area. Bites, Bits, I don't know. Working title. We'll work on it. They're segments. You know what I'm talking about. You can watch full episodes. You can watch old episodes. You can do just about anything you want to do on there. So make sure you check out our YouTube page. Follow us. Hit the button. Give us good ratings. Subscribe. All the nice things. Everywhere you get your podcasts as well, of course. And you can always listen to Mo every day on ESPN 1530 from 3 to 6. Whenever you're deciding not to take off, selfish, taking off once every month or two. How dare you? Although I think everyone's looking forward to your show today after what happened yesterday.
Are they? Because the take isn't going to change. Yesterday I got mad at David Bell. Today I'm going to get mad at David Bell. I'm madder at David Bell today than I was during the show yesterday.
For all transparency, I should point out that we're recording this on Friday.
Yeah.
And so it's going to post on Monday. You might have all new reasons on Monday.
Oh, my goodness. Well, Monday I am off. Monday is Memorial Day. So
congratulations on that. So we'll make sure check all of that out. There will be lots of good stuff. Hopefully there will be something to celebrate from the Reds' point of view because they could use some good mojo over there at the stadium. But we're not going to talk about that today.
Good.
We're going to talk about the Ring of Honor. This is perfect for us because we've done it before.
We have.
I feel like years come and go. That maybe you change a little bit, and it's a chance to rehash some old things. Everyone's thinking about this conversation. A lot of you maybe have placed your votes. Of course, the Ring of Honor game is going to be week 3 on Monday Night Football against the Commanders. We are at 11 nominees we've seen the Bengals put a couple in every year. We're down. That original list has trimmed down. And so you can choose 2 if you are a season ticket holder or and eligible to vote. The list: Jim Breach, James Brooks, Chris Collinsworth, Corey Dillon, David Fulcher, Tim Crumry, Dave Lapham, Max Montoya, Lamar Parrish, Bob Trumpy, and Reggie Williams are the candidates.
Is that Bob Trumpy or Rocky Boyman?
Yeah. It's very Boyman-like. I like seeing that maybe we could get that would be a good either like a Halloween or like a for morale around the office, dress up like your favorite Bengal or favorite other or a former employee, right? Dress up, just get Boyman in the Trumpy look. I could go for that. I like that. Also, you got to appreciate some of the strong mustaches that Montoya, Breach, Brooks. I mean, Breach. Look at Breach. Look, Breach is looking like he's running for office in that picture.
Breach looks like Ray Finkel. I mean, it's appropriate. He's a kicker.
It's really remarkable. So that's the list that you had to choose from. We're going to kind of make our cases a little bit and discuss some of the intricacies of that. I want to kind of start here with it, though, Mo. What should the criteria be? Because I feel like this becomes the hard part in these conversations. You can make cases and good cases for any of these guys, and they're all going to eventually make it. Like that. This list is just going to get smaller and smaller, and then eventually that's the person. I assume at some point, once newer players become Hall of Fame eligible, or there's going to be a new crop, probably once they get more through this list, and that's fine. But what should the criteria be? Because I feel like that's what we more end up fighting about when people debate this than the validity of cases. Like everybody has a case here for different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unlike voting in the real world where everybody has their own criteria, right? And so I've looked at this through 3 different lenses. One is statistical superiority, right? So that to me was always where the case with Chad started. He was a statistically superior player. So is Corey Dillon. The all-time leading rusher in franchise history. He's probably not going to be knocked off that perch anytime soon. And I also think from him, there is something about, like, he was the only reason to watch a lot of really bad teams. He had 2 record-setting games if you're going by statistics, which obviously with offensive linemen is a little bit more difficult. Defensive players is a little bit different than obviously if you're talking about an offensive guy who's putting up numbers, but there's statistical superiority. Then there's, okay, well, who do I most identify with team success? Well, then you don't really talk about Corey first. All of those other guys, if I'm not mistaken, either played at least in the playoffs, and in the majority of those cases, they played in the Super Bowl. And in Jim Breach's case and Chris Collinsworth's case, they played in 2. So do you value a level of team success? I think that's fair. And I've looked at this through those lenses because that's what people have told me. Different people have told me how they look at this. Some will just say, look, I want to put the guys who are at the top of different all-time leaderboards. I want to put those guys in first. Okay. And then the Corey Dillon argument, which kind of came to a head last year. I had callers on my show say, like, yeah, great player, but they never won with him. And so I want to put guys in first that achieve something on their teams with their teammates. Fine. Then to me, there's the third one. You talked about, well, they're all going to get in eventually. This is where I've changed. Ken Riley going into the Hall of Fame last year changed this for me because I'm thrilled that he got in. His son's speech was terrific. The accolades that Ken has been given after his death have been well received. They're overdue. This includes the Ring of Honor. You've had a chance to talk to Ken's son. I have. Very impressive guy. Extraordinarily proud of his dad. I watched that Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and I watched Ken go into the Ring of Honor, and the subtext was sadness because he wasn't there. I want to avoid that. So my criteria is, if we're going to agree that these guys are all going to get in, Lamar Parrish is 76 years old. If we think he's going to get in, let's not wait. I don't know anything about Lamar's health. I hope he lives to be 150 years old. Bob Trumpy is in his 70s. So I start there. I want to avoid we put a guy in and he's not here for it, because I think it's great the Bengals are doing the Ring of Honor. I love how they're doing the voting. But I think it's a stain on the organization that they waited so long to do a Ring of Honor that Ken Riley wasn't alive when he got inducted. I want to avoid that. Can't go back in time and undo that. So that I really lean toward the older players. But I'll say the same thing about this year's group as I did last year's. To me, there are 10 guys on the ballot and 1 guy who should be in the Ring of Honor. Dave Lapham was drafted by this franchise 50 years ago. It will be an embarrassment if this, for me at least, if this process comes and goes and he's not one of the 2. And I said this last year, I'll double down on it. I wish the Bengals would just say, Dave's going in. He's in the Ring of Honor. Vote for another guy. Vote for 2 others. Heck, we're going to do 2 Ring of Honor nights. One is laps and the other belongs to the other 2 you vote in. If he's not one of the 2 this year, I think I said this on my show and I'll say it here. I think people who voted for others that on a ballot that doesn't include lap should be embarrassed.
Yeah.
Any other franchise would have him in. And I think it's unfair to put him on that list with those players because Lap, I think, would admit, a good player, a versatile player, played in the Super Bowl, but maybe not on the same level as Dave Fulcher, Tim Krumrie, etc. But okay, fine. Take his playing career, which was substantial and long and successful, and add it to what he's meant as a broadcaster, an ambassador, a storyteller. Alan Cutler used to call him Mr. Bengal. It's been 50 years since he was drafted. It's not been 50 continuous years, obviously, but the overwhelming majority of those years, Dave Lapham has had a very public association with the Bengals. first team, all good guy. So my first take was, even before I saw this year's ballot, was, for me, it's Lapham, and then who else? And I arrived at Lamar Parrish because I'm leaning toward the older guys. I feel very strongly about this with Lap, though. If this comes and goes and he's not in, something went horribly wrong, and the Bengals would then have the power to rectify it.
And what better chance? What better? We always look for these moments, for these timestamps, right? 50 years ago, you drafted Dave Lapham in the 3rd round in 1974. He's here. He has been dedicated to this franchise ever since. What better opportunity than right now to do it when you make the announcement? Here's the 2 you voted in, and for 50 years, Dave Lapham's going in with them. And that's this year's class. Like, I don't it's such a layup. It's such a layup.
Yeah. I mean, I joked on my show the other day. I said, if you're the Bengals, rig the voting. If you're not willing to do it the way that we suggested, rig the voting. Like, if
they can do it any way they want to, they made it up in the first place.
No question. I mean, you could just decide, look, some other game this year, we're putting Dave Lapham in. And that way, if you want to put, let's say it's Lamar Parrish and Corey Dillon or whoever, these 2 guys get their night, Dave gets his, awesome. It's find me someone of his stature with another franchise that's not honored in a concrete way, whether it's Ring of Honor or Team Hall of Fame, whatever it is. I think it's embarrassing that he's not in already.
Yeah.
I think it is going to be just a shame if we're celebrating Ring of Honor night on September the 23rd and Dave is in the broadcast booth as it happens. And that is no knock on anybody else. I can make a case for any one of the 10 other guys. I love this process. I love these discussions, but this is very easy. I mean, this is very easy. And I really hope that if there are people watching or listening to this who have the ability to vote, you're going to lose me if Dave Lapham's not one of your 2. So let's do the right thing.
Okay. That's a great place to start. I want to go through a few other cases as we get through. So your team, Lapham and Lamar Parrish.
Yes.
The age thing. Here's the thing about the age thing. And I agree with you. Like I that's it. Everybody wants to see these deserving players have their day and enjoy their weekend and, all of that, see their face holding the suit jacket with the stripes inside of it on the break from Monday Night Football. Like, everybody wants to see that happen. The thing is, yes, age is much more likely, but that could happen to it could happen to me.
Doubt.
I might not make it, Mo. Like, there's a lot of people.
We're going into Memorial Day weekend. There's a better than average chance that when this airs,
we haven't survived.
You might have to put a disclaimer on.
Yes, this will be your last appearance. I mean, that's my point. That's where I get into a hard. Who's oldest? Who's most beat up? Who's under the? Like, I don't.
Sure.
I get it. Like, if you're I'm breaking ties that way. You know what I mean? Like,
and that's kind of what
there's a lot of ties here. Like, I think you can
Yeah.
easily make a case for ties here. So I hear you on that. I have made my Corey Dillon case many times. I will reiterate it here. He is a member of the 4.3 per carry, 70 per game, 10,000 total club.
His Hall of Fame case is really good.
It's really good.
It's
a rare case. He's one of 9 players that have done it. Him and Fred Taylor are the only ones not in the Hall. Well, Adrian Peterson will be.
Yeah.
The QBs he played with, we know the list. We've done this. 278, 246, carrying teams that weren't bad, that were bad. Everything about Corey Dillon as a player here, we know the case. Like, it's on the field, it's unimpeachable. And I would make a pretty strong argument for Corey to be there. Here's the one to me, and we've talked enough about Corey that I don't want to go down that wormhole totally again. Because I think that stands clearly from the statistical standpoint out there. The other one is this, and I don't feel like there's a groundswell about this, but when we talk statistics, you know who might have more impressive statistics? James freaking Brooks.
Yeah.
I don't know that people really pay attention to this enough. How about this? Overall, 8 years in Cincinnati, 4.8 per carry and 10.1 per reception. All right. Only one human ever did that in their career, and that was Hall of Famer Marion Motley. Okay. That's it. In the Super Bowl era, I tried to filter it out. Like, let's try to bring some more people into it. In the Super Bowl era, I made a minimum of 1,000 rush attempts at 4.7 and a minimum of 200 receptions at 9.5 per. By the way, Brooks far beyond those numbers. I'm just trying to bring people in. There's two people, Brooks and OJ, that can eclipse those numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
The 1986 James Brooks season. He had 1,087 rushing yards at 5.3 per carry. He had 686 receiving yards at 12.7 per reception. How many people in the Super Bowl era have ever done that? Ever.
Yeah.
James Brooks in 86, Marshall Faulk in 1999.
Wow.
The end.
Wow.
That's it.
Playing for the greatest show on turf, Marshall Faulk and James Brooks.
The greatest Marshall Faulk season of one of the greatest offensive seasons we've ever seen. And James Brooks 1986 are the only times a running back has ever done that. He was complete. He was the key that no one ever talks about to Sam Weich's offensive strategy. He was Marshall Faulk before Marshall Faulk. And not enough people talk about his case, and I don't like it.
No, and
it's remarkable. And that's it. There's longevity. That's 8 Bengals seasons. I'm not counting in the rest of his career. That's 8 Bengals seasons, which is plenty of longevity. It is remarkable. Was on a team that went to the Super Bowl. Was a big part of that team that went to the Super Bowl. He has a lot of boxes checked as far as I'm concerned. But I feel like when I see people talking or checking their boxes on social, I don't see his name very often. And I don't really understand. There's a misunderstanding of some of the, if we're talking statistics at all, if you want to go there, how about we go there with James Brooks?
I think, unfortunately for James, 2 things happened. Number one, there were on the 88 Bengals, there were 2 really good running backs. One had a cooler name and did a dance. I mean, like, legitimately, if you ask a lot of folks, maybe people who weren't there in 88, like 88 Bengals, who is the best back on the team? They're going to say Icky. I think he was awesome that year. But, I mean, James Brooks. So there's that. Also, I feel like a lot of the skill guys on that team sort of just get blended together, and we don't really appreciate how they stood out individually statistically. And I'm talking Tim McGee and Eddie Brown and Rodney Holman and obviously Icky, Chris Collinsworth, but James Brooks. You talk about like the one guy from that era that you wish you could plop into a 2024 offense. Are you kidding me? I mean, like, you think Christian McCaffrey's productive, which he is. Yeah. I mean, like, it would be absurd. You're exactly right. Let me ask you this. So they're going to put 2 in every year. We talked about this with Corey last season, that the issue is that there's a backlog. So they're going to put 2 more in this year, and then there's going to be a player on the outside looking in who maybe their feelings are hurt, or they go, how much longer are they going to have to wait? What would be the harm in just taking care of the backlog and putting in all these guys this year?
Yeah.
What would be? We put in 6 Pro Football Hall of Famers every year. Pro Football Hall of Famers. We can't put in 4 Bengals in the Ring of Honor.
Well, I think for a lot of the reasons that you discussed at the top here, Mo, though, is you want them to feel like they had their weekend, their moment. And if you blend in with all of these guys, I feel like it turns a little bit, you become a little bit of part of the wallpaper. It's not as much about you as it is with 2 people. And I think that's
No
I
question.
think that's a part of why you wouldn't do it. I wouldn't mind adding, like we talked earlier at the top, a third or whatever.
Yeah.
I do want it to feel like, that weekend or that Ring of Honor ceremony was you knew who it was. It wasn't like, a bunch of them.
Right.
I think that is part of it.
I don't disagree. And what I like is for a weekend we talk about 2 players. But all right, we're not going to put in 11. But if we just said, you know what, this year we're going to put in 4. And by the way, maybe you do it during 2 different home primetime games and split it up a little bit. Like the backlog is a problem. And it's why a guy like James Brooks kind of gets obscured, because he's just maybe not the first person you're going to look at. And by the way, I think one of the you brought this up before. I think one of the more interesting parts of this entire discussion is, when do you start to talk about more contemporary players? Because there's going to be a whole bunch of dudes who should at least be considered. When do they start to fold coaches into the conversation? When does Forrest Gregg get his shot? When does Sam Weish? Marvin Lewis works for another franchise right now, but Marvin Lewis. And then on top of Geno Atkins, Andrew Whitworth, Kevin Huber, et cetera. So the backlog is maybe not going to go away. So what would be like, the Bengals can change the criteria, and they could change the process, and they could change how they do this however they please. But if we're going to do this every year and feel bad that we're excluding somebody who's, God, they've waited a very long time and they're old, or we keep ignoring this person and what they did, can we fix that by shoving more than 2 guys in? And I maybe the answer is absolutely not. We're not going to do it that way. But as long as that's the case, you're going to have hurt feelings. Corey Dillon, right or wrong, was hurt last year. He's not going to be shy about it. The problem isn't the voters. The problem isn't the team. The problem is, Corey, you're on the same ballot as, what last year was Boomer and Chad, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, correct.
Well, sorry, dude. Those guys are more beloved and might argue better. Boomer was an MVP. He was a quarterback. Chad Johnson's one of the faces of this franchise. Like, there's just such a backlog. So let's say this year it's Corey Dillon and Tim Crumry, players that we believe are deserving. Okay, well, now Lamar Parrish has to wait another year, and Bob Trumpy has to wait another year, and James Brooks gets ignored another year. Like, you alleviate all that if you decide, you know what, we're gonna rectify the fact that we waited too long to do this, created a backlog by putting more guys in this one time. And maybe that's not 11, but it can be more than 2.
Yeah. And that's absolutely fair, because it's when you start going through the case, like I can just make such a good case for Tim Crumry, who we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
I mean,
one of the coolest success stories in the history of the franchise.
An absolute legend in Tim Crumry, who played a million games. And it's ironic that, his injury is what people think about first, because he was one of the most durable players at one of the toughest positions ever. Hard-nosed nose tackle, 188 games there, and all pro, got defensive player of the year votes in 88. Underappreciated in every way, everything that they wanted to be about the defensive attitude on those teams. He's the absolute, if you know candidate. If you knew Tim Crumry, you knew the way he played, you knew how beloved he was on those teams, you appreciate it's hard not to talk about somebody like that. Lamar Parrish, who is, I know, a popular one for some of the people that, again, if you knew, you knew. If you were an older fan and you knew Lamar Parrish, you know why you see a lot of votes for him. I mean, he played 8 seasons here and went to 6 Pro Bowls, okay, in those 8 seasons. Arguably better than Ken Riley at his peak. Had 25 picks of his own, 4 returns, 4 interception returns for touchdowns. Like, Lamar Parrish, was an absolute a face of the early portion of this franchise. You go down the line, you mentioned Lapp. I mean, Fulcher, Montoya. These are people that all deserve their moment. And I'm trying to, you try to differentiate through them, and I do have a hard time. Reggie Williams, 206 games, Walter Payton Man of the Year, Alan Page Community Award, 196 starts. Like, if we're talking about people that meant something to the Bengals, if that matters, and it does, it better. It's the Bengals Ring of Honor. Reggie Williams, city council, adopted the city.
Right.
I mean, an absolute face of the franchise in every way, face of the city in many ways for a long period of time. Reggie Williams should be part of this conversation too. It does become so hard to differentiate through them. And it does speak to your point of, can we hit fast forward on this a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, again, Reggie Williams sort of gets lost amid this collection of dudes who are either higher profile or more contemporary, or we're just better, but it doesn't dilute what he was able to accomplish. And that should be celebrated, and it should be honored, and it should be celebrated and honored. Reggie has had health issues. He's obviously a younger man than some of the other guys we talked about, but like with some of these guys, I just keep coming back to, they're no longer with us, and we put them in the Ring of Honor and then feel really bad about it. And you're right. I mean, any one of these dudes could get struck by lightning and it's awful, but let's play the odds here. So if we acknowledge there's more than one criteria, can't we do something for 1 year that covers every criteria and say, here are some statistically superior players. Here are some guys that are a little bit older that also meant a lot to this franchise. And then maybe there's another one or two beloved characters that, maybe get left behind on this particular list, but they were in their time very popular, meant a lot to the team's success. And so this year we're going to have a large class. Like, that doesn't mean you can't go back to next year and have a 2-man class. Like,
no,
what would be, is there anybody who's going to be like, well, I was going to go to the game when they were going to induct 2, but now they're inducting 5. I'm not going. Like, it's just, I love Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. I love them. I watch them in baseball. I watch the NFLs. I watch Springfield. They're terrific. They're also really long because there's a lot of people. But, and this is different because it's done during a small halftime ceremony. It's really not so much about the halftime ceremony. It's about the days and events leading up to it where these players get talked about. I know for me, if they, let's say they put in 4, I'm going to talk about each of those 4 guys equally. And if it's 6, I'm going to talk about each of those 6 guys equally. We can't do that. And again, not every year, but I think that's the big issue here. There's just, when you look at a list of 11 guys and go, well, they're all going to get in eventually. Okay. Why wait? Why do we have to wait? Why? I mean, if they're all going to get in eventually and you do 2 a year, there's going to be one guy on that list that has to wait 6 years. Why? Why do we have to do
that? And it makes all the sense in the world. I wish that you could find a way to make that happen, because it just doesn't feel like that's going to be a thing that's going to happen.
No.
And that's the, that's the problem here. For me, Lap, Dillon, Parrish, Brooks, I have them at my top. Fine. I'm like, any of those are in my sort of top tier. For me, and that's zero disrespect to the other names on the list. It's just, if I'm trying to draw the line somewhere where I would be looking, I'm with you. I think the 50th anniversary Lap layup should be easy, the move. And then I'm taking, Dillon. Go the all running back class. Go Dillon and Brooks. Go Lamar. Like, I love it. Like, it's great. That would be my pick if I could.
There is no one on this list that if they got in, I would go, boy, that guy's not deserving. But if Dave Lapham's not one of the 2, I think that's a shame. I also think these conversations are interesting. I've asked this kind of rhetorically. As this process goes, let's say for the next 10, 12 years, somebody has to, I always say this about the Hall of Fame, somebody has to be the worst Hall of Famer, and somebody has to be the best player not in the Hall of Fame. Who's the cutoff? Who's the guy in Bengals lore, Bengals history, that has a case? I'm not talking about Kevin Case-Mahorn, like players that you would actually consider their candidacy and go, nah, Because not every very good player gets in. Not every player who had a key role on a really good team gets in. Not every player who had a short run of excellence is going to get in. Who are the guys that once this is filled up a little bit, we go, yeah, I can't do it. I can't pull the trigger. I can't really make the case.
There's two from the, prominent names department for different reasons for me. One, Carson Palmer.
Yes.
That's going to be a nah.
Yes.
Like it
Agreed.
can't be that. And the other one, if I'm thinking of like the type to fit your description, Darnay Scott.
Yeah.
Really good.
Awesome deep threat.
Played opposite Carl. When you were the number 2 guy, it becomes harder. I wonder in the same respect about TJ.
That was my name.
Because you were the number 2. But my God, what a 2, right? And is that the way we'll talk about T. Higgins? No, we have to mention T. Higgins in every podcast. So I had to make sure I snuck that in. But Darnay, TJ, these great 2s that there have been over the years, I think are the ones where you end up saying, nah, because you weren't number 1 on the team.
Well, somebody who, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody who I follow on Twitter asked us about Tyler Boyd. And I read the replies, and the replies were like, no. And I don't, and like Tyler Boyd, you talk about somebody who fit their role perfectly. It's him. Very good career. Ring of Honor? No. Not every very good player who played for a lot of seasons is going to get in. I also think one of the more interesting things about this is, as we have more player movement, how do we start to assess guys? If you look at the players on the ballot now, there's a lot of dudes who played a long time in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
We kind of don't do it that way anymore. So we're going to have to sort of recalibrate what greatness looks like and talk about players for what they did over smaller chunks of time. And I think that's why these conversations are really interesting to me.
I've always said, and I've talked about this with Hall of Fame voting, and I'm not going to obviously go down that path that gets me angry every time, but like I want a 6-season window. Okay. That is enough of longevity and peak. That's the combination of longevity and peak that I need to see. Show me your best 6. Okay. And let's talk about it. In football. That's all I need to see. And let's compare your best 6. The guy, Frank Gore, playing 18 seasons. I don't care. Like it's great, and that deserves its own conversation. But that's not something that I thought. Show me your best 6, and I think at a certain point, when you talk about Team Ring of Honor, like show me your best 6 Bengals seasons is probably where you need to go with it, and probably where it should land. And I think there's guys, the next cast that needs to go through will be full of a lot of players who had a best 6 here. You've named a bunch of them. I mean, Gino is going to be at the top of that list. AJ Green, Andrew Whitworth. You're going to have a long line of players that gave you a best 6 here, and some that were probably, without listing them here off the top of my head, not even going to think about. And when those come in, there's plenty to choose from. And then you start bringing in some really fun conversations when you compare the new with some of the older ones that are a little bit more on the fringe, and that's fun too. And we could get to that soon if Mo gets his wish. You could put everybody in this year, 11 member class, and all right,
11's too many. I'll admit that. let's do 6 this year and 6 next year, and then we're good. And then we can kind of restart how we do this.
Yeah. And the actual Hall of Fame did this same thing too back in the 2020 when they did the 100-year deal. They said, all right, we just have this backlog of older players. We have to amend that. We have to fix that. And they found a unique way to do it, and they did it, and boom, everybody went in. The end. And there's no reason the Bengals can't do something like that.
And like the Bengals are allowed to say, hey, we're going to put people in and not subjected to a vote. The Reds Hall of Fame, there's a modern player ballot, which they do public voting, they do media voting, and then they'll say, hey, here's High Pockets Calhoun from 1890. We're putting him in. And nobody voted on him. I don't know if they ever had a player named High Pockets Calhoun, but sounds like
you're thinking of Noodles Hahn.
Noodles Hahn, of course.
My guy Noodles Hahn. I'm a big Noodles Hahn guy.
But like they will just say they did this with their inductions 2 years ago. The name of the general manager who from the 60s that they put, I can't remember his name. They just said he's in the Hall of Fame. We didn't vote on it. No, we voted on, I think, Bronson Arroyo and Danny Graves. And then suddenly we're putting this dude in with the Bengals. It's their Ring of Honor. So they can announce, hey, guess what we're doing? We're putting Lamar Parrish and Bob Trumpy and Tim Crumry and James Brooks and Dave Lapham in the Ring of Honor. And you could vote among these 5 dudes to find out who the other guy is. They can do whatever they want. There's no I lose my mind with this with people at UC when we debate like players who should have their numbers retired. And it's like, well, there's a criteria. And it's like, they can change the criteria. By the way, there's no criteria. That's me. But it's your team. You can do whatever you want. So I think it would make sense to spend the next 2 years kind of in a way just righting some wrongs and saying we're going to put these guys in, and then we're going to maybe kind of take a look at how we do this moving forward. And maybe moving forward they induct 1 person a year, or they induct 2 people a year, or 2 people every 2 years, something like that. But I do think they have to get out in front of some of the older guys while they're still here. And I think they also have to take care of the Corey Dillons and James Brookses, who you don't want to have to make wait longer and hurt their feelings even more.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be very easy to say we drew a line of age, like all the people on this list that are older than blah 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 deserve to be in. We all agree they're going to go in. We're just going to do it now, and then we can start over. That would be certainly an easy way to do it, which is kind of how the actual Hall did do it by saying let's focus mostly on these older players.
Right.
That's really what this is about. Is we have a better understanding of what all this is now, and I think it's the one thing that the Bengals haven't done right with the Ring of Honor. Like they finally went to it, but they never really. In my opinion, I think they partially did. I never felt like they apologized for the fact that they hadn't done this for so long in a way. Not like standing up saying, to begin, I'd like to offer an apology, but to kind of, that's how you apologize, right? Is by saying recognition here that this should have been done long ago. We don't want to see anybody else have a Ken Riley situation. We have decided as our way of apologizing by putting everybody in right now, our bad, you should have been in long ago. So we're just doing it.
Right. And Ken Riley, unfortunately, is the avatar for this, because when he went in, my take was, I am thrilled that they're doing this. This is great. It's fun to talk about these players. It's fun to have these debates. It's awesome to recognize these guys for what they did. Ken Riley should obviously be in. They should have done this 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And
okay, we can't go back in time, but we can avoid something like that happening again. And so it's why I really lean toward the older players, because I don't want to have to interview Lamar Parrish's grandson and ask, how cool would it be if your granddad, he might not even have a grandson, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have to do that. I had the conversation with Ken's son, and I hated it because I shouldn't have been talking to Ken the second. I should have been talking, or somebody should have been talking to Ken Riley when he was with us and was being honored and celebrated. And I really feel strongly about avoiding that. And I really feel strongly about putting Dave Lapham in this year.
Perfect. Tying the bow on that. I had alien stuff, but this was so good I didn't even get to it. There's a big book coming out. People are sending very specific alien questions, but we're going to set that up to get to it.
We are getting into the abyss of June coming up, where there's going to be nothing. Unless there's and I heard you and Jay talking about the Adam Schefter T. Higgins tweet, unless there's some sort of T. Higgins non-news you need to discuss. We've got a lot of time to talk about aliens.
What we have figured out is that news will be invented every week by others for us to react to. We did a whole segment. Me and Jay did 10 minutes where all the news was made up that we had to debunk. It's just that's where we're at right now. It's going to be debunking news that's fake and lists, and then people putting Joe Burrow's AI hair on me, which is where we're at. And that's fine.
Have you done the Ring of Dishonor conversation?
No.
Can we do Bengals Ring of Dishonor this summer?
Next week on Balds Don't Lie.
Are we going to watch an old game? We used to do that too.
Yes, we are going to do that.
Okay.
We are going to do that. There's many conversations about what
All
direction that's going to go. We should have that conversation very soon coming up.
Very
so,
good.
all right, Mo, great stuff as always. Make sure you're checking out. We'll be back with Who Dey Light with Mark Shalafu. We'll be back on Friday. Send in your questions for that. Send them to the Growler Podcast at gmail.com. And Mark will ambush me with those. So looking forward to it. Thanks, Mo. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, Paul, you too, man. Thanks.